Good morning and welcome. I'm Deanne Healy. I'm the president of the Peabody Area Chamber of Commerce. Each year, the Peabody Chamber hosts a legislative breakfast to hear from our elected officials on what they are working on, along with issues being addressed on the local, state, and federal level. This year, we're using a slightly different format in that we'll focus on 3 issues the Chamber has identified as having an impact on businesses and the community. Many people think of the Chamber staff are employed by the City of Peabody. We're not. Some people think we're too political, being seen as working too closely with our elected officials. And others think we're not political enough. But it's important to have these discussions and try to find a way to compromise and strike the right balance. As an association, the Chamber is here to bring our members information and to be a convener to find solutions. So keep that in mind and know that the Peabody Area Chamber believes that given the right tools and support, any business can be successful, which is why we focus on advocacy, promotion, and community involvement. Our most powerful work is often done not in the public eye, but will continue to be an advocate at all levels of government for policies that further enhance the social and economic prosperity of the cities that we represent. So before we begin, I'd like to first recognize all of the elected officials that have joined us today. Unfortunately, Mayor Betancourt is sick, so he will not be joining us. But we have Senator Joan Lovely, Rep. Sally Kerins, Representative Tom Walsh, Norman Abbott, who's the regional director with Congressman Seth Moulton's office. So thank you. Also joining us are ward councilors Julie Daigle and I think Pete McGinn. Light commissioners Tom Paris and Tracy Valetti. As you are all too keenly aware, the price of just about everything continues to rise. And with the support of our sponsors, we aim to keep our event tickets affordable to everyone and to do the little extras such as being able to bring 20 students and several teachers from Peabody schools to attend today. So thank you. This year, we're expanding the recognition of our sponsors by moving from an event program that only the attendees ever see to the creation of program guides, which help us share information and resources to the entire business community, as well as highlight our sponsors throughout the year. And you'll see copies of those on your table. The Advocacy and Key Issue booklet not only features advertisement and messages from our sponsors, but the online digital format includes a listing of all Chamber member businesses. I want to acknowledge those businesses who sponsored today's forum and ask for you to please just hold the applause to the end. So our table sponsors are the City of Peabody, Gravock, Legacy Life Care Management, Peabody Municipal Light Plant, Salem 5 Bank, and JJR Enterprises. JJR Enterprises actually is not even here today, but they sponsored a whole table of students for us. Our coffee sponsors today, and I see everyone has been enjoying that, was sponsored graciously by Atlantic Ambulance and Metro Credit Union. And our corporate sponsor was Community Credit Union. So thank you all. Our Diamond members are that special group in that they show their support and commitment to the Chamber all year long and include Boston Children's Hospital, Gravock, Hemisphere Development, M&T Bank, MP, also known as MassPay, Salem 5, Sandra Network, Spectra Networks, the Ruggiero Family Funeral Home, Institution for Savings, and our new member, Big Pig Barbecue. Our Diamond members, oh, that's too hot. And I just misplaced one of my pages, so I'm going to have to wing it now. But that brings us, last to not least, to our premier sponsor, North Shore Bank. They have been in the North Shore community for a number of years. You know, you've seen them around. They are a big supporter of both personal checking, commercial lending, and our community. Anytime if you're on Facebook, there's probably not a week that goes by that they're not handing out a check to somebody. And so we appreciate their involvement in the community. We appreciate that also includes the Peabody Area Chamber as well. They have been a sponsor of the annual Legislative Breakfast Forum for a number of years, and we appreciate their continued support of our mission. So please join me in welcoming North Shore Bank CEO Kevin Tierney.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, Deanne, on behalf of myself and my colleagues from North Shore Bank, we want to thank you and the Peabody Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, which we're pleased to sponsor once again. Yeah, this legislative breakfast is intended to discuss the current local business climate and important issues such as workforce development, training, and workforce housing. All timely and necessary topics given the challenges we as businesses experience, especially at this time. Perhaps some of you may have heard something in the news about banks recently. Yes? Well, it's been an interesting and busy 2 weeks for bankers and businesses alike, as the other bankers in the room can attest to. A word that has been used by many people lately is resiliency. The Secretary of the Treasury has talked about, and the President of the United States has talked about the resiliency of the banking system, especially the community banking system and the local banks in the country. That's a very appropriate word to be using because, as everyone in this room has demonstrated over the past several years, one word comes to mind, and that is resiliency, and the ability to adapt and adjust to changing times. As an integral part of the Peabody community for over 135 years now, North Shore Bank has more than likely seen and experienced it all in terms of business cycles through many economic ups and downs, and in some cases, not much movement at all. But through a dedicated team of bankers, strategic planning, and keeping our ship on course and persevering, we are always mindful that our first priority is to serve our customers, you, the businesses in the community, and the nonprofit and service organizations that make up the community at large. And we strongly believe that keeping the lines of communication open by bringing together and convening, as Deanne mentions, government officials, elected officials, local businesses, nonprofits, such as we have here this morning, can only make all of us better equipped to face any of the challenges which may lie ahead. So thank you for being part of the conversation this morning, and I hope you enjoy the panel discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you this morning. My name is Chris Ryder. I work at City Hall, Chief of Staff to Mayor Betancourt. I also serve as the city's business liaison, and I'm proud to serve as a member of the Peabody Area Chamber of Commerce Board. I'm here today to moderate a discussion. I think Deanne and her team at the Chamber were onto something when they said speeches are nice, but a forum, a discussion, can be thought-provoking and a little more interesting to you, the members of the Chamber. And that's really what we're really trying to focus on, is what can we do to help your business and help you succeed in a challenging economic landscape. So, without further ado, let me introduce the panelists. We are very pleased to be joined today by Catalina Trujillo from Citizens Inn, Mary Saris from Mass Hire, the North Shore Workforce Board, Deanne Healy, as you all know, from our chamber board. State Senator Joan Lovely is here. Representative Tom Walsh and State Representative Sally Cairns. And my good friend Norman Abbott from Congressman Seth Moulton's office is here as well. Folks, we're going to get right into the discussion, and the topic to start with is workforce housing. According to CHAPA, which is the state's leading affordable housing advocate, Massachusetts must build 200,000 new homes by 2030, and 140,000 need to be market rate. The question for the panel, and we'll start with Catalina, how do you balance production of market rate and affordable housing? Actually, let's start with our state delegation on that one. The balance between market rate and affordable housing. What's that? Absolutely. So I'm going to start with State Representative Sally Cairns on this question. Sally.
Good morning. Wow, right out of the gate, Chris. Let's get right to it. Good morning. It's great to be here with the Chamber, the Peabody Area Chamber, which is a stellar community convener, contributor, and just overall great organization. It's really a pleasure to be with you all this morning. So I am on the Committee on House Ways and Means, and we're in the middle of our budget hearings. If I've heard it once, I've heard it from every single agency: workforce, workforce, workforce. Workforce training, workforce housing, flexibility, support. And the housing conversation, as we know, is in the big three of the issues facing our entire state: housing, transportation, childcare. So in terms of housing, I'm going to use my own town of Danvers, which I represent, along with parts of Middleton, West Peabody, of course, and Topsfield, Wenham, and Middleton, as I said. So in Danvers, we have done an overlay district, which is a big project, and it's in order to accommodate a project of 145 units now, and a percentage, I think 20%, will be affordable, which is a conversation as well. How are we defining what's affordable? If you work in a nonprofit, I happen to have a daughter who does, and you earn in the mid-high 40s, good luck. So I think we all understand the need for housing and creating more of it. So the changes that drove the zoning change in Danvers to make room for this project, and it's dense. Kevin knows this. Anyone who lives in Danvers here? Yeah, okay. So it's more dense than any of us might have liked, and my view is we have to do this. We have to create more housing, and so we're going to live with a little bit more density than we would like. The state can help this along by supporting changes to the zoning laws or to the statutes that govern zoning. So that is what happened with the accessory dwelling units. We've had those in Danvers for a really long time. Now that you don't need a 2/3 vote of a zoning board to get those changes, or of a town meeting, you need a majority vote. It's an easier hurdle. So these are the types of ways in which the state can deal with and encourage and help communities. I have one complaint, which is that, I don't like complaint, observation, where my town went through this exhaustive exercise. It was 1.5 years, by the way, of planning work to get the overlay district. And transportation adjacent housing is a big goal. It was a last administration. We all want that. Well, lo and behold, the regulations changed after we went in Danvers and went through this entire change of zoning and the number of units and so forth. And then they came out with a different set of regulations and goals. Kurt is smiling because every local planning person knows of whence I speak. So I'm really hoping that at the state level, we can make adjustments because I'm sorry, Commonwealth, did I understand? I thought you wanted us to do adjacent transportation adjacent housing, and we've gone and done it, and now it's not 12, it's 15. And the number of units, I just want to say, I'm all about doing the housing. I think the numbers that go along, I don't know if it was MAPC that walked us through the targets, but I'm hoping that the new Housing and Livable Communities Secretary that's being created, I know that the governor and lieutenant governor testified on it this week. I'm pretty sure we're going to do that. And that will maybe change the conversation and make communities feel supported, not sort of cast aside. Like, work with us. We want to work with you. Give me back the bus stop, the one single public transportation element in the entire town or in the downtown. Please give us back that bus stop, and then you will have some public transportation. So those are the types of partnerships that we have to have. And if it takes statutory change, then that's what we should do. Okay, I don't want to go on too long.
Thank you, Rep. And we'd like
Hit
to,
it, Tom.
and this is an important discussion, so we'd like to encourage just a freewheeling discussion. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that, there are programs at the state office today that everyone can take advantage of. And I think if you look at the city of Peabody, which is the area that I represent, and you look historically at what the city has done, I think we can be pretty proud of what we have done in the past. And really, that is an example that a lot of communities can use as we move forward. For instance, when I was growing up, this was really the leather city. You have people today who say, why do we call it the Tanner City? Well, because they were all tanneries way back when. A lot of those buildings have been converted into housing. If you go down Foster Street, there are a couple examples where, the buildings have been repurposed to provide housing, affordable housing, workforce housing. Another thing that I think we can be incredibly proud of, if you look back 40 or 50 years ago when the A.C. Lawrence building was converted into housing, and then as recently as a couple of years ago, with the help of city officials, Councilor McGinn was very involved in this, working with HDAC, the state, the city, federal government, everyone got together and was able to protect that roughly 240 units of affordable housing. So these are examples where we have already done it. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of the shortage of housing we have today, other than we can use those as examples. There's also a great program that was created a couple of years ago under the Baker administration with the sale of the property at General Electric in the Seaport. About $60 million was placed into an account called Commonwealth Builds. And what that does is it's similar in some respects to the set aside for certain units in any development where we say, okay, so many units have to be affordable. Below market rate is really the definition, not necessarily affordable. There are units of housing below market rate that people in this room probably could not afford. So that has to be kept in mind. However, with the Commonwealth Builds program, it really is encouraging communities, specifically gateway city communities, to develop areas or repurpose buildings for home ownership. It would be condos or housing that isn't rental, so the people will be more invested. They will be building some wealth. There's a whole issue on generational wealth that we could talk about all morning. But there are examples that Peabody has already done that other people can use, and there are programs that the state currently has that if we take advantage of, I think it does assist us in some ways as we move forward.
So from a housing perspective, as economic creator of economic mobility, right? It seems that there are some towns that are more for housing development and have all these housing development plans, but there's other cities and towns that are very protective of their zoning and their ordinances. So from a state perspective, is there anything that's being done to address these zoning issues in order to maybe get communities that have a very small percentage of affordability to become more affordable and maybe help regulate and maybe spread the levels of homelessness in more equitable ways. Is there anything that's being done on that end? Because I keep hearing a lot of the gateway cities having to bear this price, but not necessarily other.
Sure,
wealthy
no, I'd be
communities.
happy to take that. Good morning, everyone. I too am a little under the weather. That's why I'm on the end, so don't breathe on anybody. Thank you for the question. Sorry, Representative. We have 40B, Chapter 40B, very familiar to everybody. It requires that each of our communities have at least 10% of their housing stock is affordable. We see many, many communities out of the 351 cities and towns across the Commonwealth that have not met that threshold and don't try to meet that threshold. Now, I have taken a pretty big deep dive into the Community Preservation Act, of which I am in favor, and Peabody was at the forefront. You were in the first year when you would get 100% match. You would really have been able to add that to your housing stock and do all kinds of really great things here in the city of Peabody. But 10% of those funds have to go into 3 buckets: housing, parks, and preservation. But you don't have to move that money. So any communities that have adopted that, they don't have to spend it. There's no requirement. So they put their, I'm going to use housing for an example, 10% into their housing bucket year after year after year. Millions of dollars. Don't have to spend it. So I want to actually make a change to the Community Preservation Act. If you don't want to spend it on affordable housing, then give it to another community that will spend it on affordable housing. And there was an example of that up in the Haverhill, Bradford area, where Haverhill said, well, we'll do that. Bradford, could you give us money? And they said no. But I think we need to make a change to it. Now, I've talked to the heads of CPA. They're like, well, we'll get there, Senator. We're not getting there fast enough. I just wanted to say really quickly, too, about ADUs. Salem has taken on accessory dwelling units, the so-called in-law apartment, granny flat, whatever you might want to call it. But now ADUs can be rented out to non-family. Usually if it's an in-law, you have to preserve that for family. And we're looking at rents in this market area, $2,000 for a studio, $2,400 for a one-bedroom, $3,600 for a three-bedroom. What family can afford $3,600 a month? It's well over 50%. As you said, our nonprofit workers, as Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll used to say when she was mayor, if you pour beer or coffee for a living, you're not living in the community where you work. You're not able to live here. So we've looked at ADUs in Salem and to be able to do that and Governor Baker just signed a bill last year that would allow any of that ADU unit, and it's up to 900 square feet, tax exempt, real estate tax exempt. So we could actually take a look and incentivize people to be able to put an ADU in their single-family home, for example. It's not, as you said, there's pushback. There is pushback in communities saying, well, I don't know, that'll change my single-family neighborhood, that'll make it more dense. But are we really serious about creating affordable housing, about creating a unit for somebody to be able to move in? Maybe it's a college student, somebody just out of college with college loans. Those are the conversations we have to have.
I would add too that there's some really great nonprofits in the area that are doing some awesome work that Congressman Moulton was excited to fund, whether that be Harbor Light or the Haven Project, providing some assistance to these folks to help generate some additional housing within the district, which is fantastic. But trying to find a way to also include the transportation aspects and the workforce aspects that are all interconnected. Seth just put out a proposal with the new GM coming in, talking about some of the ways in which, if we're able to get the MBTA and other transportation projects here in the Commonwealth up to snuff, and even just, in general, comparative to some of our counterparts internationally, that solves a lot of our issues as well. You're able to get from, Springfield to Boston in 45 minutes. That opens up both, housing and job opportunities for folks. And right now, without the North-South Rail Link, you can't get from, Salem down to New Bedford, with any sort of ease. And so trying to provide a way that really opens up the Commonwealth so you can get from anywhere to anywhere else in the Commonwealth provides access to some of these housing opportunities, some of these economic development opportunities, and some of these workforce development opportunities that, could help us take a step in addressing a lot of these issues.
Thank you, Norman. And we are fortunate enough to have our students here today. And you may wonder why housing is a topic at a Chamber of Commerce event. Well, in addition to, you'll hear a lot about a housing crisis, just finding affordable housing so people have a place to live. It's important that our business community can count on that their employees and their customers can live close by and frequent their shops and their businesses, and also just have a place to live affordably. So that's why it's important in this context. One more question on housing, then we're going to switch to workforce development itself. Do you feel most of the burden for housing production falls on cities like Peabody? And our smaller communities, maybe like a Danvers or a Topsfield or some of these smaller communities, are they doing enough to help? Why don't we start with Representative Walsh?
All right.
They saw you move that microphone.
The last thing I want to do, Chris, is pit one community against another by saying, we're doing something somebody else isn't. I think Peabody is at their 10% or just above as far as what the law says they need to do. Do we need more housing? We do. But it's how that is planned and how it is managed that is the key. And that's where your local government comes in, where, your mayor, your city council, your planners kind of look at where we will be in 30 years from now. It's not just today, it's where will we be down the road? And will we have a community that is both sustainable for our residents and our businesses? So we have to look down the road. But I just caution against, are there communities who should be doing more? Certainly. But there are a lot of factors that go into that. Where is the population? Where are the services? Where are the things that the residents of this area need to get to quickly? So, if you put an affordable housing complex in the middle of a community that is so rural, does that really solve our problem? So it's a conundrum. But I do think that the question should not be, is Peabody doing its share? It's how do we get everybody in every community to want to provide for their residents?
Representative Karen, you touched on Danvers earlier.
Correct. And I so agree with Tom. You don't want to be pitting Danvers against Peabody, against Wenham or Topsfield. There is one topic I think you have to be willing to talk about, and it's water. So in some of these communities, it's understandable that they think, wow, 147 units, we're in water restrictions already. So to that point, to the credit of Senator Bruce Tarr and Senator Lovely, what's your name? Senator Lovely, I blanked for a second, and others, there's a North Shore Drought Task Force. We have been, since I came into office again, 2.5 years ago, the water issue is getting a great deal of attention, and it is so necessary because we're hoping that we can avoid these drought periods. And if it's truly a matter of, and it looks like there's a lot to be said for the fact that it's a storage issue. If we can get our arms around that and work cooperatively, these communities can all work together to address prospectively drought periods, well then that will be one more obstacle to affordable housing removed. So I hope that we can continue on that path.
Norman Abbott.
Yeah, I think both of the representatives are 100% correct in that, first of all, the trying to make sure that there's adequate water infrastructure is so important. Which is why the bipartisan infrastructure bill has some really great programs and funding opportunities for sewers, for water tower infrastructure that could help make a huge difference here and sort of help with some of these issues. And now is the time to be thinking about that sort of stuff. To Rep. Walsh's point, you have so many transit stops within Massachusetts that could be a hub for additional development, allowing for people to get access to jobs and to school. You can have the best jobs in the Commonwealth. You can have the best, schools. You can have the best housing opportunities. But if people can't get there, it's kind of a moot point.
And Catalina, from Citizens In perspective, larger communities versus smaller communities.
I agree with you. I think that every city needs to look individually on what the needs are of their community and the people who are already there and the people that we want to invite to be part of these communities, taking under consideration the levels of poverty that we have in the state. I know there's a bill, the MBTA communities bill, that it's, there's a proposal to really enforce people who are in the MBTA corridor, but I also feel that that's a lot of exclusion of other communities that are not doing their share fair. I don't want to pin communities, but I'm not a politician. And I do wish that other cities and towns were doing more. And I think that that's part of the goal that at the state level, maybe we should look into in order to find a possible solution for the housing crisis. I know that I see it every day with the people that come. We have 35 shelter units that are full all the time. The state is asking for expansion. We're looking for motel rooms right now for an additional 15 rooms to provide wraparound services. Through the pantry, the amount of money that we're investing in food and providing people with basic needs is outstanding. We have about 2,000 families that we're feeding monthly, unique families. I mean, before COVID, it was about 650. Now we're at 2,000 after the provisions of the relief for COVID went out for food insecurity. So definitely housing is an issue, and I think it's a cycle of housing and basic needs and food and job force development, which we're going to talk about. But I want to thank you today for giving us some clarity and perspective. And I think that I'm done with this part.
Catalina, thank you very much for contributing. Appreciate it. We are going to switch over to workforce development. And workforce development, how do we create the conditions for a strong workforce so that people have jobs and our businesses have employees? Childcare is one of the key issues facing families in the workforce. The status of women in the states gives Massachusetts the rank of 38th among 50 states for childcare. The average annual cost for full-time childcare for an infant exceeds $18,000 in Massachusetts. How do we address that? Thank you, Mary. $20,000. No, not at all. That's very important. Thank you very much. Mary Saris, ladies and
Welcome,
gentlemen.
Mary.
Please have a seat and join the forum, Mary.
I just wanted to, I sort of jumped on the childcare thing. Again, we've been talking very recently in the legislature about this, and we convened a special task force on early education and care. Last year, it was headed up by Representative Alice Peisch, and a couple of really key takeaways, and obviously the rate structure is key. There's not a provider who can afford to be paid less. There's not a worker who can be paid less, and there's not a family who can afford to pay more. So talk about a conundrum. So we have been looking very closely at rates. We did some grant programs called the C3, Commonwealth Community Cares, Commonwealth Child Care Cares, Triple C, yeah. And so these were a lifeline for providers. I talked with a provider at the Taste of Peabody, shout out to the Rotary, last week, and she said, oh, thank God I was able to get that funding. I tried to share some of it with my workers, and it kept us afloat. The worker issue, these are all tied together. The flexibility, the pay, the working really long hours and getting burnt out. We're going to have to look at ways to bolster that workforce because the businesses depend on it. You can't have people who can't get childcare. How are they going to come to work? And yet, you just can't help at the end of the work week, you take your paycheck and you give it to your provider and you're still in the hole. So we're looking very closely at that. I just did want to go back for a second to housing. I'm looking at you, Kevin. At some point, I would love a conversation about the funding of affordable housing and the lending and the perspective of the local banks? And are you looking at the state and saying, for crying out loud, if you'd loosen up XYZ regulation, then we could lend and we wouldn't be putting prospective developers up against a wall because they can't make the margin? And so just, I'm putting that out there because it will leave my head. I can't write it down while I'm sitting. So thank you.
Mary, I was hoping maybe you could contribute and chime in on labor costs, on childcare costs, and how it affects labor. Thank you.
I got it. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Saris with the Mass Higher North Shore Workforce Board. We cover the whole North Shore, federally and state funded primarily. And our role is to try to build a balance between the supply and the demand side of the labor market so that every company can find the talent that they need, and every individual can find a job with a real career path behind it. As you can see, as you know, first of all, I'll ask which companies here are actually hiring people right now? Can you raise your hand? We're really out of balance right now, and I think you all know that. And we're out of balance for a whole bunch of reasons. First reason, just quickly, is that we have a very healthy economy. People were talking about the recession caused by COVID. That was not a recession. That was a public health crisis. The economy kept moving even through COVID. And therefore, we have an excellent economy right now. Lots of business activity happening in virtually every single industry. What COVID did affect is the supply side of the labor market. The number of people interested, available, and able to work. Balanced out by the fact that every company is hiring, so that people in general can find jobs pretty easily right now. You're out of work for 2 days and you can get a job somewhere else. So that we don't have a shortage of jobs. So everybody's working. Unemployment around 3.5% right now, which is the high. Usually at this time of year, the unemployment rate is a little high after the holidays and before the good weather sets in. So to be at this rate now is a little scary. I know the Federal Reserve Bank is desperately trying to do things that would increase the unemployment rate because they feel the job vacancies are part of the inflation issue because people are getting higher salaries to work. Personally, I like people getting higher salaries, but it does cause an upset in the economy right now. We have lots and lots, as you know, you've heard, you're probably sick of hearing about the baby boomers retiring, but we saw that in COVID. 55 and older, that age group, has not returned to the labor market the way they were pre-COVID. Maybe you can't blame them and say, good for you for retiring, but we really need some of them back in the labor force. We need to figure that out. On the other end, the 18 to 25-year-olds, really affected by COVID from their educational standpoint, completely confused or questioning what they want their future to be like, and therefore are not doing necessarily what we want them to do, and that is to latch onto a career when you're 18 years old or 21 years old and stick with it for your whole life. So those issues are affecting us. And I don't know if anybody read The Globe. They're doing a lot of articles, but there was an article last week that said there's 2 answers to the labor shortage. Anyone see it by any chance? One of the opportunities is we need to have more babies. Population growth has stuck. Right now, it's something like 1.5 children for every woman alive, the birth rate. Very low across the whole world, let alone in the country and in Massachusetts. That's one answer. The other answer, and I'll look to Norman here, is to increase immigration. We have always in Massachusetts relied on immigration as part of our labor force growth. We need immigration. We know right now there is lots of refugees living in Massachusetts that are not allowed to work, which to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It takes at least a year for a refugee to apply and get working papers so that they can go to work. So, can I ask a question? Or do you ask the question?
Well, the question was on after we have all these babies, how are we going to afford to care for them?
Yes. Well, I do have an answer for that too, by the way. And I will jump right into Scandinavia right now. Daycare is basically free in Scandinavia. It's considered part of the public education system. And so it is not an issue there. But in our case, daycare is a totally separate industry, not attached to the public education system until, in some cases, when you're 3 or 4 years old. But generally speaking, not till you're 5 or 6 years old do you become part of the public education system. So I think that's a process that we should look at. Massachusetts has the highest daycare cost in the country. And as you say, Sally, I do not understand why, when the pay is so low, it costs so much for daycare. It's such a conundrum there.
Nobody's getting wealthy.
They aren't. But as far as immigration goes, and I know that's a federal issue, it would be good to know how to speed that up to let more immigrants go to work. Throw that out at you.
You're preaching the choir on that one.
Okay.
I think that, you know, when Seth came and spoke with you guys and at the end and some other chamber members a few weeks ago, that was something that we touched upon. You know, there has to be some meaningful immigration reform. You know, our side is ready to negotiate and come to the table and say, you know, what does this look like? And, you know, we need to see some, you know, proposals and sort of have a meaningful debate on that issue. And I you know, that isn't, I don't think has happened in some time, unfortunately. But to the childcare question that Chris, you mentioned, you know, since it's budget season and, you know, that's, I think, on top of a lot of folks' minds. You know, one of the appropriation things that we are, you know, signed on to is childcare access means parents in schools. So that provides, you know, funding to schools to allow for childcare that is highly subsidized to take place there. Also want to shout out Middlesex Community College, which is doing some really innovative things, partnering with a lot of companies in the district and beyond to do a workforce training in the life sciences area. So folks are able to get a associate's degree and get hands-on experience with these companies. So not only are they getting trained more quickly, but they're also able to get the hands-on experience that they need so they can go right from school to the workforce and, you know, have these connections with these folks and the experience so that they're trained up and ready to go. And I think that those sort of programs and those innovations and companies partnering with our community colleges and our public colleges really makes a world of difference. So excited to see where that goes and excited to have gotten them, I think, $1 million in funding this year. So.
Senator Lovely, any other thoughts on child care costs?
Sure, thank you, Chris. You know, so we're talking about housing in the last round of questions, and now here we are with our daycare providers because we don't pay them enough. These are, you know, students that come right out of college, go right into the industry, get great experience, and then move up the ladder because they can't afford to stay in the child care provider space. So we have that issue. And so what have we done at the state level? We've incentivized with scholarships and tuition reimbursement and trying and increased pay to encourage people into the industry. And then, you know, we did see through COVID when almost every child care provider shut down, except for emergency workers. So the YMCA stayed open, thankfully, and got our emergency personnel to work, be able to take care of everybody who was sick. But a lot of those didn't reopen either. You know, you might want to have a little neighborhood child care provider right in there, someone's home. And most of those went away. So how can we get those, encourage those back into the workforce as well? You know, you talk about wanting to have more babies or encouraging more babies. China's going through the same thing. Anybody who's been reading the paper on that? China, the one-child policy. China, which has to take care of, you know, its billions of population, is now loosening that as well because they can see going forward. But Mary, to your point as well, immigration, we have to move the needle on immigration and get people into the workforce. I don't see these, the baby boomers who did retire coming back. I think that a lot of people got burned out, especially if you're in the education space, you're a teacher near retirement, you're a nurse near retirement, you're done. COVID put you right over, and you're not going to come back. But we have put a lot of programs in place, and as the representative said, C3 grants to be able to make sure that we are encouraging people into this industry and paying them so that they can afford to work in the industry. Thank you.
Why don't we do one more quick hit on workforce development? It's one I think we can all speak to and important to some of the members. How do we expand upon the success of the Essex Tech and the vocational programs at Peabody High? Mary, why don't we start with you, maybe give you a minute.
Sure. Well, I think we are already doing that. There is a program that's out, sponsored by the state, called Innovative Pathways, that funds. Oh no. Oh, I think I lost it.
There you go.
There it is. Sorry about that. We are actually very involved, I think. The state has a program called Innovative Pathways, which takes our high schools and provides the opportunity for them to include, shall we call small tech programs right within those high schools. So I know Danvers High, Marblehead, Swampscott have jumped on that, and they are now doing that. They are providing those opportunities right within our high schools so that kids in a comprehensive facility can actually get the hands-on learning, which is what kids like to do and which is known as the best way to do that.
Great. Rep. Walsh.
Thanks, Chris. There is a lot that is being done, the program that Mary talked about, but also, the state in the last couple of years has been, I think, very generous in the grants that the Essex Tech has received for their culinary and animal science projects, and then technical training as well. I think it was about $1.7 million for the animal and culinary arts programs, and another $540 million just for technical training. Very important. The other thing that I like is that there are several high schools, Peabody's among them, that part of their day is spent at the high school getting their core curriculum completed, and then going off to Essex Tech to learn a little bit about the trades, whatever field they choose later in the day. Essex Tech is a fantastic facility. And I think that, adult education is incredibly important. We hear a lot about, there's a suggestion that community college might be free for people over 25, but there's a lot of people who are 25 years old or older who may not want to go back to college, but could use a certificate or some training in one of the trades and then go out and get a job. So that's a way that I think we can help in workforce training as well.
Thank you, Rep. Senator Lovely, any thoughts?
Yes, actually. So, yeah, Essex Tech is an amazing facility, and but we're also seeing at Peabody High, at Salem High, career technical education coming back. Actually, towards Salem High, just last month, they have 8 programs from medical assisting, auto tech. But one of the things, and a shout out to Essex Tech, they actually loaned all of their marine equipment over to Salem High, because we're going to see a wind farm technology right in the Port of Salem. So they're actually going to be training high school students to be able to work on the marine side of this, those big ships that will be coming in and bringing the components in. Really just a lot of job opportunity right there. So we're looking at that to be able to, again, make that happen. Rep. Walsh stepped on or mentioned, thank you, mentioned the after-school programs at the Tech, the evening programs at the Tech. I will tell you, the Essex Tech is just about a 24/7, 365 operation now, and they want to expand because they know how important and how students want to be able to attend that school, especially for these career technical training.
I don't want to be the skunk at the Essex Tech lawn party, The tech is amazing, and what they offer is extraordinary. Have any of you students ever gone for the tour? Did any of you consider Essex Tech before you? Okay. And are you there or no? You're at Peabody High? Great. Glad you're all with us, by the way. So the tech is amazing. It serves 17 or 38. How many communities? How many communities?
38, I think it's 38.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so clearly there's a lot more demand than there is space. But there are two issues. So one is how do you broaden the opportunity and the availability of opportunity? Now, it's a kind of a sore subject in the town of Danvers, not because we don't love, and to me it's always the Aggie. I loved the Aggie, and that's how I think of it. And we love it. But we are 9% of the population of that tech area, and 17% of the seats are occupied by kids from Danvers. So is that fair? Is that equitable? Does it really make sense for a vocational technical school to use grades, discipline, and attendance as their top criteria for entry? So let's make it equitable. Let's make the opportunity available to the kids who want it. And then let's also recognize just the resource issue, the space issue. I wish we could have more, maybe 3 of these schools rather than just one, and with all of the issues that go along with it. So, bravo for the 3, After Dark, Nighthawks. And I know they've got some issues with their faculty and the contract and so forth, but they're doing great work, and let's try to spread the wealth, if you will.
Mary, do you have a final thought on tech before we switch to transportation?
I'm not sure. Anyways, all our tech schools are amazing. Essex Tech is, Lynn Tech is. It's just amazing what goes on in those high schools. They are difficult to get into, and that's a very important conversation that we need to have. I know Essex Tech is trying to expand, actually, the number of seats that they have to handle the wait list that they have there. I have no idea where they are in the fundraising aspect of it. It's a very expensive undertaking to do that. But I think the work the high schools are doing within their own school to do these programming is laudable and absolutely should be continued along the way. One thing I'd like to say as we're ending is that we recently received, we have many grants from the state, which we're very grateful for, but we recently received a grant to provide stipends to high school students who are working in companies in STEM-related internships. The internships are 100 hours, and if you really like the student, you can hire them and keep them on there. So it's like tryout employment, but it provides high school kids with the opportunity to see what these careers are like and begin to think about themselves in these careers. And I think with our labor shortage, it's important that the business sector kind of begins that conversation with young people early to plant the seed in their head and keep them focused on the future. And they will eventually probably come back to you as fully educated employees. So if anybody would like to do that, any companies here would like to give a shot at that, please let me know, and we can send somebody out and begin to help you put it together. And you might think, what would I do with a high school student? We can think of a million things most companies can do with a high school student. So please consider it. I'd really appreciate it.
Mary Saras from Mass Hire, the North Shore Workforce Board. Thank you very much for joining us for this portion of the forum.
Hey, Chris. Before we move on, I just had a couple of last thoughts,
Please.
if you don't mind. A couple of thoughts. So when I toured the Salem High career technical education portion of what they're doing, of the 900 students at Salem High School right now, 600 were in exploratory to see if they wanted to go. So 2/3 of the population were taking a look at career technical training as a part of their high school curriculum. Wanted to just make that note. So it's very popular. Also, at the college level, both the the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Senate president and the House are looking at this Mass Reconnect, which is free college education at the North Shore. At the community college level for students 25 plus. It took me 6 years, nights and weekends, to get my bachelor's degree when I was a working parent with 3 kids in grade school. Just to have that type of support to be able to allow parents like me to be able to finish that education and be able to use that to attain higher levels of employment is so important. So I just wanted to mention that as well. I really hope that we do that. Thank you.
Great point. Thank you, Senator, very much. Let's move on to transportation. Welcome, Deanne Healy. Thank you, Deanne, for joining us. I think that we want to start with Route 114, and I was hoping maybe State Representative Walsh, who's been very involved in helping to oversee the progress, can kind of give us maybe a brief overview, Tom, on what's going on Route 114 and how, in the end, it's going to benefit all our member businesses.
You better believe it. Route 114. This is something, really, I've been working on since I came back into office, and even on the city council, because we started off with we forever are hearing from people in the Esquire Drive neighborhood, the Loris Road neighborhood. That's primarily the areas where I would hear from residents concerned about the safety of Route 114. Then, if you remember, just over a year ago, the city council convened a public safety meeting and asked the delegation to join with MassDOT to express their concerns about Route 114. Specifically, there had been several fatalities on a section of the road. So after some badgering by my colleagues and myself, MassDOT has been, I think, incredibly responsive, and not to everybody's liking. They looked at the road, and primarily this is a focus on safety, not necessarily convenience, but safety. And they have made some choices that I would say we don't necessarily agree with, and we're trying to get some things adapted a little bit. But ultimately, their goal is to address the safety of the road, and they have it broken into 2 sections. You have the eastern part of Route 114, which is basically from Cross Street to the Holy Cow, Esquire Drive area. And Esquire Drive and Violet Road, for any of you who are familiar with the area, there are 2 sets of lights. It's very confusing. It's dangerous. And there are very few solutions, but we are begging them to come up with something that will work and make it safer as people use those sets of lights. Maybe even making it 1 set of lights and somehow reconfiguring that. On the western side, which is partly in my district and then Representative Kern's district, there are a host of other issues, and I'm going to let her talk about that side more than I will. I will say that we as a delegation meet via Zoom with MassDOT on a, I'd say, monthly basis for updates, expressing to them the concerns of neighbors. We still have a problem with somehow syncing the lights. This has been a problem at the Loris Road intersection, where we're trying to get the biggest problem they have, and I've sat there several times just witnessing what the neighbors go through, is if you park down below, kind of below Descens's Jewelers, and watch that intersection, when the light changes down at Cross Street or the entrance to the mall, the traffic backs up and people block the intersection. So when the green light for people to come out of that neighborhood comes on, they can't move. And we have been trying to get this to a point, and unless you put a police officer there 24/7, it's a little bit difficult. So we're working on trying to sync the lights, trying to get them a little bit of a reprieve with that. I'm going to let Sally talk about the western part. I'll stop there, and we can get back to it.
Rep. Kearns.
Thank you. So I'm looking at my friends at North Shore Bank nodding because you're on 114 all the time, as I am. I live off of Route 114 in Danvers and did not expect to be dealing so intimately with Route 114. However, the fatal crashes that were occurring prompted us all to really beg MassDOT, and they have complied. They are working with us. They assembled a team. They were flabbergasted when all 3 of our offices, if not all of us, went to the crash safety audit on the road, literally walking down Route 114. Do not recommend that. Though pedestrian improvements are going to be part of the safety improvements, I was a little shocked to hear that one of the first things that they're going to do is put a crosswalk at the intersection of Sylvan and 114, right when you can peel off to the right to go west on 114. And the poor traffic engineer last week was kind of taken aback, but so was I. And I said, could you please provide more data, like how many pedestrians are crossing so that we can be certain. I do want to say a huge thank you to Deanne Healy, who as president of the chamber worked with us to ensure that the businesses would have an opportunity to say, hey, listen to how we see this road. We're on it. So Metro Credit Union, Starbucks, the people who own or manage the property at Five Guys, and who else, Deanne? And Cappy's came last week to a meeting that Deanne and I were there, and Tom came, Senator Lovely, I think you had come for a bit. And the point was, businesses, please tell us what you're seeing. And it was enlightening. There's way more pedestrian activity on 114 than I would like to think. And what is the issue? Workers getting to their jobs at that Starbucks, maybe at the bank, I don't know, the bank, I'm not sure about that. And just to loop it all together to my favorite topic, the bus, the MBTA bus, stops on Sylvan Street, which I've never seen. Okay, yeah, I admit it. I have followed the 435, the 465 bus to see where exactly does this bus go. But so it's all tied together. Workers getting to their jobs so that they can live in this area where it's very expensive, in our public transportation desert, in our area where we have too little of it. So north-south rail link, sure. Yeah, you can't get from North Station to South Station. You can't get from Danvers to Boston or even Salem quickly. So it's all tied together, but it's exciting, and I want to thank the Chamber for ensuring that business is at the table when we're talking about it, and we're going to get there.
Let's go to Senator Lovely, then back to Tom Walsh, and then I want to hear quickly from Deanne, and then we'll wrap it up.
Just a quick thought, and I just want to say thank you to my colleagues. They are really leading on this issue, so thank you so very much, and to the Chamber. Eventually, right now, Rep. Walsh had said this is about safety. How do we safely move people on that corridor? How do we safely move pedestrians in that corridor? Because we've seen too many fatalities, and that's what's driving this. And eventually, so you're going to see hash lines and barrels, which we already see in bollards, and to again enhance that safety, kind of wake drivers up a little bit. But eventually, there'll be which I've talked to MassDOT about, and they're putting in their plan, and it takes planning. It's almost like a green boulevard. As you're going down, it's going to be green down the middle. It'll be trees and dedicated turning lanes, and really make it much more pretty, inviting, and safe. And that's the bottom line is safe. Thank you.
Rep. Walsh.
The other piece of the Route 114 issue, not necessarily tied to MassDOT, has been the issue of car carriers offloading in the middle of the highway. The painted islands, the yellow painted islands, and you'll see the car carriers for the various dealerships offloading there. So I've worked with my colleagues again in the City Council working on an ordinance, because our city solicitor has suggested that it could be addressed locally by ordinance. So that is in the works with the council. But we also have filed a bill that would prohibit the offloading of vehicles on any state highway. because it's not, although it's an issue that is very dangerous on Route 114, and as I said at the city council meeting, if any one of us parked our car in the middle of Route 114 and walked across to the bank or to a car dealership, I guarantee you when you came out, your car would not be there. Yet the car carriers think that they can do that. And what fascinates me about this more than anything is if you think about the last couple years where every auto dealership around did not have the inventory they needed, that gave them the space to have the car carriers more than any other time on their lot. So I just don't understand. I think it's more a convenience or a laziness on the part of the car carriers, and we are trying to correct that. But that is part of the safety issue on 114 as well.
Thanks, Rep. Deanne Healy, what are you hearing from members on 114?
Well, we have really tried to stay at the forefront of it because we saw what happened on the eastbound side in front of Cappy's and the mall on that side when businesses didn't have input into what was happening. It was just kind of sprung on them. So we've tried to be more proactive on the westbound side. This past meeting, the MassDOT had identified several complexes that had seen the highest number of crashes, and that's where they're testing out these traffic calming patterns. And that's the key part to keep in mind. It's a test phase. These are temporary fixes to see if they work or if they won't work or what other problems they might cause. So it was great to have those businesses. Every business that was going to be affected was reached out to. A number of them showed up, so that was great. And MassDOT listened to them. They didn't get exactly what they came in for, but they did listen to the feedback, and my conversation with them is everything that the businesses asked for is staying in that initial plan. So this is a phased approach, and we just have to be patient. A lot of it is caused by the way people drive. They're inconsiderate. They're discourteous to each other. So that's what's causing some of these problems. It was interesting at the meeting in December, which was a public forum. People will talk about well, who is riding a bike on 114 or who's trying to walk on 114? That's just crazy. And some of us would even say, who's trying to take a left-hand turn out of some of those plazas on 114? You're taking your hands into your own life. But the reality is, as we learned, is that there are people trying to get to work. And they are walking on 114, and we have to be able to make sure that they can cross the street to get to work and make sure that they're accommodated. The other thing that I just want to kind of bring full circle too is we've had conversations with the Mass Transit Association, and we've talked about having more public transportation in Peabody, maybe bringing back a trolley at some point. And the reality is that there is money there, both state and federally, for us to make some of these things happen, but we also have to ensure that the ridership is there. So there's no point in doing a test case of will a trolley work if nobody's there to take the trolley, which brings you back to the whole housing issue.
Just to add on to that too, one of the great proposals that I know that we're really excited about that I think addresses a few of these topics is the Salem Skipper, which will provide, I believe, $2.7 million to expand what is essentially a rideshare service that goes to specific targeted areas. So less hopefully worrying about stopping on the side of Route 114, but that will bring microtransit to Danvers, to Peabody, to Salem to get folks from the station out to the mall, out to other crucial areas, and just want to give a tip of the hat to Senator Lovely for the money that she got in the bond bill a few years ago for the Peabody trolley. Hopefully that's something that we can see happen in the future. But there is federal funding and grant opportunities, whether that be Chrissy grants, connecting community grant programs, and always excited to chat with our friends over in Peabody about ways to make that happen one day.
Thank you. And I wanted to mention Representative Walsh and Representative Kerins. From Mayor Betancourt's perspective, thank you for securing money for some local transportation initiatives that we hope to see develop in the years ahead.
So 2 quick shout outs. I think of the trolley that Tom has been talking about for so long as the little engine that could. And I look forward to the day. I think it's going to happen. And a shout out to Gravock for hosting the meeting with the MassDOT folks last week. It was really awesome of you to do that, and a great show of togetherness to Massport. Like, we're a unit. We're a community here. We're all working together. So Thank you.
Thank you. We understand some of our members have to peel off, but we do have a few minutes for questions. Any questions you have for our distinguished panel? We have a microphone over here. Love to see if any of our students have a question. It could be as simple as, hey, can I get a job when I graduate? Some of these people are movers and shakers. So any questions, just raise your hand. We'll bring the mic right over. And if not, we will thank our panel. Any questions? Please raise your hand. All right, not seeing any. I want to thank. Wait a minute, we got a question. I knew it.
What encouraged you all to go into politics?
Here's a question. Do we have an extra 45 minutes? Why don't we start with Senator Lovely?
I'll start. I built a playground. I helped build a playground in my community. When my kids were 2, 4, and 6, the playground was the same equipment my husband had played on when he was little, that one hot metal slide, couple broken rubber swings. That was it. So we put together a playground committee, and over the course of a year, we worked with the city of Salem, and over the course of a weekend and 100 volunteers, we built a playground, and that was it. That propelled me into public service. I started to volunteer in my community. I sit on different volunteer opportunities, improve other people's neighborhoods, ran for city council, and here I am in the Senate. So it was a playground. Thank you.
Representative Sally Karen, same question.
In high school, I was very active. I was class president, but also very active when my town was redistricted in 1977, 78, and testified at the State House about why that was a bad thing for my town. And also, we grew up in the post-Vietnam, well, no, we grew up during the Vietnam War, and that spurred a lot of political activity. So my message is get involved, run for student council, join a club, get with your friends, participate, and jump into the fray, because it's been a wonderful opportunity to make change that's positive. Okay, over to you, Tom.
It's kind of funny. We all jumped at this question. I was probably about 8 years old when I told my parents that I'd run for office someday. But it was really because I was watching at the time Nick Mavroulis and Fred Murtagh, who you may not recognize those names, but they were both running for mayor, and I just loved the excitement of the whole campaign. And that's really what started my interest. And then, same thing, during school, junior high school, I ran my first year for student council and lost. And as one of my friends said in the 8th grade when I was running the second time, he said, well, you lost last year, you'll lose this year.
Thanks.
And then I won. I won in the 8th grade. But the most important thing is, I think why we all do this in public service is we like to help people. The hardest thing of this job is saying no. And telling people, that's hard when you have to tell people no, that this cannot be done. We try to solve problems on a daily basis. And probably the most fun and sometimes the most challenging part of the job is, as I say, when you cross that threshold into your office, you really don't know what the day is going to be like. You know, you have a plan, but a lot of times we answer for whatever the top news story is of the day, or something happens during the day, and all of a sudden what you planned to do all day has changed. So the variety of the issues, as I say, we know a lot, or we know a little about a lot of different topics. And again, the goal is to help people.
So yeah, I volunteered at the 2004 Democratic convention in Boston. And that's when things started for me. But my first job out of college was working for a Senate campaign where I walked with this candidate across Massachusetts and sort of saw all the issues and all the need, whether it be the streets or the Green Line trains that were then, had a 30-year lifespan and were at an average age of 28 years. And that was in 2011. So, take that, or sort of issues with the, Cape Cod water infrastructure and the need there. And seeing all that and wanting to help people and knowing that there was all these issues, you're never going to be out of a job because of that. And so really started me down that road and have been, working in politics pretty much ever since.
Great, thank you. I know we're really running out of time, so I want to wrap up. A big hand of applause, if you will, for our panelists today. And special thank you to Chris Ryder. He is the chair of our Government Relations Committee, for doing a great job moderating. And I just have 3 quick things I want to say before we leave here. There's been a lot of talk about lots of high schools today, and we have our Peabody High School very well represented here, and they also have a very unique and creative work program. And if you're interested, reach out to Chris Lord. We have been instrumental in matching up many businesses to hire students to come in and be employed or do an internship, which has worked out really well. So it's been a great program and a great way for businesses to get the help that they need. Next, I would like to also introduce you all to Brianna Clark, our new membership director at the Chamber. This position, Brianna joined us in January. It's a new position for the Chamber. We've never had a membership director, to the best of my knowledge. And her role is to connect with all of you to make sure that you understand how to use the Chamber to your benefit, connect you with services and programs and things like that. So she's going to be your go-to girl. And last but not least, Sally mentioned Greyvock and allowing us to use their training room last week to host a meeting. And if you haven't heard, the Chamber of Commerce is now located at 10 Centennial Drive inside Greyvock, which allows us to have access to a fabulous training room and conference rooms and everything for us to host meeting in. So we appreciate Greyvock offering us office space there as well. So thank you all for coming today. Hope you enjoyed this new format. Hope you found it informative, and have a great day.